In this project, we're going to use our laser engraver to cut out a name, to vector cut a name. We want that name, all the letters and all the words in the name to be connected. So we just have one shape, which we could use for a desk plate, a door plate, possibly a picture frame with a mat for a picture frame. All would be good applications of this technique. So let's get started. Let's click on our text tool and type in some text. With that selected, we're going to maybe make that bold. Maybe make it a little smaller to where we can work with it on our page. And then with that text, we want to make a stand-up desk plate. Let's think possibly in acrylic. So I'm going to take a rectangle and weld that to our name. I'll double-click the pick tool to select everything. Press C, the keyboard shortcut, to center on a vertical plane. We'll now select our rectangle and nudge that downward. I have a very small nudge set up. That looks about right. Now we'll select both of those and we'll use our weld tool. Anytime we have two or more objects selected that can be welded, then the weld tool, along with other shaping tools, may show up on our property bar. So we're going to select the weld tool there. That welds it together. We'll left click on the X at the top of the color bar. That removes all fill, and we'll put a red outline on it, and there we have our finished tag. However, by doing it this way, we've totally lost our descenders and really made it quite unacceptable. So let's undo that. I'm pressing Control Z to back up a few times. Then instead of leaving this text in normal, I'm going to triple click on the text. That selects the whole block, and I'm going to hold down Control Shift K. Control Shift K cycles between normal lowercase and upper lowercase. Now we'll select both of those, double-clicking on the pick tool. We'll go through our weld routine again. We'll maybe put a red outline with that right mouse on red, left mouse on none. And now we have a pretty nice name tag. However, those corners look a little too sharp for me on the top. So let's do something else. We'll zoom up on just that part. Shift F2 is the hotkey for that. I'm going to select just this node and this node. So I have those two nodes selected. We'll go to Window, Dockers, Fillet, Scallop, Chamfer, and we want a fillet there, and maybe 1/10 of an inch. Let's see how that looks. That looks much better. We'll roll that up to be sure the other side looks pretty good with that 1/10 inch, and it does. So we'll zoom back out a little. And there we have a finished part. If we wanted to make this fit on maybe an 8-inch block of acrylic, then we'd want that to be about that width. So let's maybe make that, let's say 7.5. And there's our finished part to be cut out of wood or acrylic and then mounted. Now we'd like to make a slightly different style nameplate, let's say desk plate, just like we did for Cheryl in the other project. So let's go to our text tool and let's type in a name. This time we've decided to use script, which looks really good as a cutout letter. But let's begin by telling it we want no fill. That's the left mouse button on the none button, and the right mouse button on red. And there we see our letter. We'll see that in the brush script font, which is a standard CorelDRAW font, not installed by default, but it is on the CorelDRAW CDs. Let's zoom up on that, and we'll see that in most cases we have a really nice overlap where that looks like it is a connecting script. And when it's printed, of course, it will be connected. You won't notice those overlaps. But when we're vector cutting something out, obviously, it will cut through each of those red lines, leaving not at all what we had in mind. So we'll need to weld that. But just before we do, I notice we don't have a connection between the C and the O. All the rest of the letters have a nice overlap. So let's go to our shape tool, and we'll kern that a bit by dragging a box with the shape tool, dragging a box around all the nodes to the right of the C. Then we'll nudge. I have a relatively small nudge, I think about 20 thousandths set up. So we'll nudge that back to where we'll have a nice smooth transition between the C and the O. And then we'll zoom back out, and let's now consider, we note that that name has 3 descenders. What would happen if we change that to upper lowercase as we did in the Cheryl name tag? So we went into the text tool, we'll triple click on that to select the whole thing, Control, Shift, K. And we see we have generated several problems. Number one, it's very hard to read a script in all uppercase. And number two, the letters are no longer connected. And number three, we still didn't get rid of the descenders. In that font, we still have the 3 descenders, which if we chop those off, will make that name almost illegible. So that won't work. So let's undo that, put it back here, and we'll take a different approach, which we'll explain shortly. But going in that direction, let's now weld just the letters themselves together. But since we only have one object, which is artistic text, selected, we do not have weld on the property bar. So instead, we'll go to Arrange, Shaping, and indeed, we have weld available to us here. So we'll click on weld, and now we have nicely connected, smooth transition between each of the letters. We're going to make a copy of that. We're going to make a copy of that by just dragging that over to the right, dragging the left handle clear over to the other side, holding the Control key down. While we're dragging, we're going to press the right mouse button to duplicate that. And you'll see where we're going in a minute with this, but for now, I'm going to fill that with black and turn off the outline. So that would be right mouse on none. And in a moment, we'll flip that back. Now, let's create our rectangle as we did in the last project. We'll select now these 2 objects, meaning the rectangle and our name. We'll press C to center one on the other. And then we'll weld those. I should have left them selected. Now we should have the weld on the property bar because we have 2 different objects, so we'll weld those. And at that point, we could flip our name back. Let's zoom out on everything, and you'll see why I flipped that the way I did. Now we can flip it back in here and see that what we could do at this point is vector cut that out after we have raster engraved that, which shows our complete name. And if this were an acrylic, Probably what we'd want to do is reverse that. But I'm going to undo that, move that back over to the side, because what we really want is a little bit of an outline around that. So the black is going to raster engrave the name, so we'll see even the descenders, but we want that cutout look. But we don't want the cutout look to be right on top of our cutout. We'd like to have a little border around the edge of it. That would be a project for contour. So let's go to the contour tool and put maybe 1/10 of an inch to the outside. Let's say maybe 50 thousandths instead of 1/10 of an inch, and see how that would look. That looks really a little too much. So let's go 40 thousandths and apply that. That looks pretty good. So now we have the original, which is red, and then we have a contour, which is 40 thousandths to the outside of that. What we'll do now is break that apart, because we no longer need the inside one. So let's break contour group apart. I'm going to press the Tab key till I get the red one. How do I know it's red? Now, how do I know which one is selected? Notice down here the red hairline. I'm going to delete that. Now we'll zoom out to everything, be able to drag this back over here, holding the Control key down so that that comes back in perfectly where it originally was. We'll tab again to select our other part, fill that and outline that with red. Now we'll zoom in on a portion of that and see what we think. Indeed, that looks just exactly what I had in mind. However, as we did before, that corner on the top looks a little rough, so we'll zoom out on everything. Select just our red outline. We'll go to our Shape tool, select that outermost node, and this. We have 2 nodes selected now. Shut down our Docker over here and bring up our Dockers and Fillet, Scallop, and Camphor. And we'll tell it we'd like to apply 1/10 of an inch fillet. Let's zoom in on a corner here and see how that looks. Looks good. Let's pick up right where we left off with this one, except I want to undo that last change we made, that is the rounded corners. But let's take this same part and think about doing this on possibly matte board for the inside of a picture frame. And to do that, let's say we wanted maybe a 6x8 matte board. So we'll tell it it's 6 inches wide, 8 inches across is the size of our page. We'll now move this down close to the bottom. And then we'll go back to our Shape tool. I'm going to select those bottommost nodes. I'm checking to confirm I have only 2 nodes selected, and then I'm going to drag that up. So in essence, I've just inverted my rectangle. Now maybe we'll round those corners again, but let's select all 4 of the nodes. We'll select those 2, holding our Shift key down, try to get just this one and this one. Again, holding the Shift key down to add to the selection. We still have our Fillet, Scallop, Camphor setup up there. Let's see how that 1/10 of an inch would look there. Then we'll zoom in on that and see what we've done. Now we have a rounded corner. We'll slide up to the top and see that we've rounded the corner up there also. All right, we'll zoom back out and see what we have. Possibly we'll temporarily put this in a group and put that in the middle of the page. And now I think what I'll do is put a page frame on. A page frame would be, quickest way to do that is to double click on our rectangle tool. That puts a page frame on, or creates a rectangle the size of the page, which is 6 by 8. And here we have a mock-up of the final mat board component. What we did is use the page frame and the internal rectangle to cut out the page frame. After, however, we use the text to raster engrave. So we have here, if not obvious, a piece of orange mat board that with a white background. So when we engraved the Jerry Cortez, that went down to the orange core, but then it left us a nice outline. I'm going to zoom up on an area of that so you can see what we've done. But by contouring the name itself, that gave us a nice border around there and a very legible name down below. Project completed.